2025. This is a Recusant 9 transmission. My name is Raja Mir. We are 7 years in, and today the Home Secretary announced the chair and 2 panel members of her national inquiry into the grooming gangs. They announced it 6 months ago, and it took them 6 months to announce Anne Longfield as his chair. I don't know why I'm laughing. I really don't know why I'm laughing. The 2 panel members are no better. One's from Her Majesty's Constabulary, so the police force that failed to prosecute a single police officer involved in the cover-up for now 20 odd years, including the police officers in Rotherham who were gang raping children in the back of police cars. And a former council chief executive, and I think she was chief executive in 2 London local authorities, one of which is Tower Hamlets. And this is Sadiq Khan's backyard, where they're still denying the grooming gangs. Okay, what I'm going to do is play a little bit of the announcement from Shabana Mahmood. I won't do the full half an hour, so don't worry. I'll play a little bit of that where she makes the announcement and maybe the Chris Philps response. And then I will do what I do, which is rip Anne Longfield, tear her to pieces. Metaphorically, before the police decided it's an incitement to something or another and trying to arrest me. I'll tear her to pieces in terms of through the information I share, because I do not believe she's a fit and proper appointment in any way whatsoever. To my friends in the Conservatives, in Reform, in Advance, even in the Labour Party, a very, very good evening. And yeah, watch what I do. If you find value, by the way, yesterday's broadcast, over 2,500 people watched it live, and there was just, next to no sign-ups, nothing like that. So it's why I'm struggling with the lives, if I'm honest with you. They take a lot out of me, and maybe I just need to get back used to them. They take a lot out of me, and very little return, if I'm honest with you. And I'm not on about financial return, I'm just on about numbers. Without numbers, they will win. They're getting away with this because they know they've got the numbers, and not enough people will object to what they're doing in a coordinated, strategic manner. And the way in which a lot of people will object will be through ranting and raving and perhaps the odd bit of racism. That's what they want. They don't want this. They don't want this level of organisation. So, please, if you're the thousands who watched yesterday, and I checked the analytics, the vast majority of the thousands who watched yesterday are not subscribers in any way. They're not even signed up to the channel. And that costs you nothing. It's 2 seconds to click something. But if you can, please support the work. Please, at the very least, sign up. I am 100% community funded. It's through a newsletter, Redwall and the Rabble. It's as simple as that. It takes you 2 seconds to do. And you don't even have to pay. You don't even have to pay. And if you want to pay, the odd time you're going to buy me a coffee, I think it's £3 is what the Buy Me a Coffee page charges. I'm glad you enjoyed that, and it's not my style. Short videos aren't my style. I'd put the odd one out, but they're not my style, mate. I came from a policy world. I'm a very serious person from a very serious space. This is a very serious subject, and I'm of the viewpoint, if you haven't got the attention span for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, half an hour to understand some of this, really you're of no value to me in this campaign. You're no value to the survivors in this campaign, because you're not going to put the the heavy lifting. You're not going to do any of that. So that's where I am. I'm not of the TikTok generation, and as a friend of mine told me today, Raja, you don't get Gen Z. I said to him, I don't know what came before Gen Z, but I don't get them either. So, I have already spoken with Andrew Gold. I did a very lovely interview with Andrew Gold in January or so, I think it was. over 500,000 people watched it before YouTube removed it. And YouTube removed it just before the national inquiry was announced, because, and I suspect it was the Labour Party, it was the government that went to YouTube to have that interview removed. It's now back up, but it's not, and it's not been promoted or anything like that. So that is why. Okay, let me bring this up. Let me put my headphones on. I've not shared this link, by the way, today on X or Facebook or anything. Just on the basis that you should, those of you who follow my work, you should be, you should click the notifications anyway, shouldn't you? So when a video goes out, you should get an email or something notify you on the phone. Thank you. If you sent me some samosas, thank you very, very much. And you don't need to apologise for not seeing the Andrew Gold. It's been pretty much blacklisted. That's why. And you'll see why. When you watch it, you'll see why. And you'll see that over 500,000 people viewed it. We've not got here without having to fight to get here. And we're not going to get where we need to be without having to continue fighting. That is the simple truth of where we find ourselves in this country. And when I say fighting, I mean political activism. Political activism, even. Voting, campaigning, that sort of stuff. They want us on the streets. They want us angry. They want us smashing windows. We're not going to do any of that.
Before I call the Home Secretary to make a statement, I remind honourable members that they should not refer to any specific cases currently before the courts, and that they should exercise caution with respect to any specific cases that might subsequently come before the courts in order not to prejudice these proceedings. Home Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I will make a statement on the independent inquiry into grooming gangs, the appointment of its chair and panel, and the inquiry's terms of reference. I know that, for many, this day is long overdue. For years, the victims of these awful crimes were ignored. First abused by vile predators, they then found themselves belittled and even blamed when it was justice they were owed. In January, my predecessor asked Baroness Casey of Blackstock, who's here with us today, to conduct a national audit on group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. With devastating clarity, Baroness Casey revealed the horror that lies behind that jargonistic term. It is vital that we too call these crimes what they were: multiple sexual assaults committed by multiple men on multiple occasions. Children were submitted to beatings and gang rapes. Many contracted sexually transmitted infections. Some were forced to have abortions. Others had their children taken from them. But it was not just these awful crimes that now shame us. There was also an abject failure by the state in its many forms to fulfil its most basic duty: protecting the young and vulnerable. Worse still, some in positions of power turned a blind eye to the horror, even covered it up. Despite a shameful lack of national data, Baroness Casey was clear that in some local areas where data was available, and I quote, disproportionate numbers of men from Asian ethnic backgrounds were amongst the suspects. Like every member of my community who I know, I am horrified by these acts. We must root out this evil once and for all.
Okay, I've just stopped it there. If it's okay with you. I've just stopped it there because I want to just comment on some of the things that Shabana Mahmood has said. Shabana Mahmood, of course, is a Mirpuri heritage. She's Pakistani, but also specifically Mirpuri heritage, reliant on the Muslim bloc vote, and is now the Home Secretary. You've heard her talk about, just one out before I paused it, she said many people in her community are horrified by this. This is a narrative her and Jess Phillips have been pushing. The ones who have been speaking out the most are the ones from her community. I can presume what she means is brown-faced Pakistanis, Muslims. Absolute bullshit. Let me be very, very clear. That belief, that position has no grounding whatsoever in any fact. You can travel the length and breadth of this country and you will see people of a background such as myself, very few and far between, in calling any of this out. What you've then got is Jess Phillips sat next to her when she's made a reappearance, and she just sat there making faces throughout the entire throughout the entire statement and exchange. She is, of course, has been dragged back out to try and reintegrate her because the survivors have called for a resignation because she called survivors liars in the attempt to impose the previous chair, who was also a Labour Party insider. So that is where we're up to and what she's admitted to. What Shabana Mahmood has admitted to here is 3 stages of failure. One is the crimes themselves. And she goes into detail of what was done to these children. Second is the failure by agencies tasked to safeguard and protect children to safeguard and protect children. So first of all are the crimes themselves. Secondly is the failings of the agencies involved. But you know what she's admitted? This is the Home Secretary, the Labour Party Home Secretary. And this is why we should remain positive. We should remain hopeful. We should have faith in ourselves, and we must have faith in each other. Because from the outset, I have always maintained it is the actions of ordinary people like you, like me, that make the difference. She has admitted to the cover-up. Her own words, she admits to the cover-up. Those that look the other way and those that covered it up. Those are her own words. So before we get to ripping apart what they're trying to do now, we've got to pause and take solace that our truths are now accepted as the truth. And that, my friends, did not come without sacrifice. I have friends who are dead in the ground who fought for this and did not live to see the day when the Labour Party Home Secretary admitted to the cover-up.
The sickening acts of a minority of evil men, as well as those in positions of authority who look the other way, must not be allowed to marginalise or demonise entire communities of law-abiding citizens. What is required now is a moment of reckoning. We must cast fresh light on this darkness. In her audit, Baroness Casey called for a national inquiry. In June, the government accepted that recommendation. And today, I can announce the chair and panel that will form the leadership of the inquiry and a draft of the inquiry's terms of reference. The inquiry will be chaired by Baroness Anne Longfield. As many in this place will know, Baroness Longfield was the Children's Commissioner from 2015 to 2021. She has devoted her life to children's rights, including running a charity supporting and protecting young people and working for Prime Ministers of different political parties. In recognition of her service, Baroness Longfield was elevated to the Lords earlier this year. At that point, she took the Labour whip, which on taking up this appointment, she will now resign.
Okay. She introduces Baroness Anne Longfield, skims over her direct political links with an offhand comment, she will just resign the Labour Party whip. That means the Labour Party loyalty. Apparently, you can just, take it off like a badge and put it down. After 25 years of working in the machinery of the Labour Party and being rewarded by that system, apparently she's just going to put it down and now be independent. Yeah? And she talks about some charities she was involved in and the Children's Commissioner role she had. Wait till I share some information. Wait till I share some information. They are relying on your ignorance to try and legitimize their proposals.
Alongside her, I can also announce her two fellow panellists. The first is Zoe Billingham, CBE. Zoe is a former inspector at His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and currently serves as chair of Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Foundation Trust. She brings deep expertise in safeguarding and policing, specifically in holding forces to account. The second panellist is Eleanor Kelly, CBE. Eleanor is the former Chief Executive of Southwark Council. In 2017, she supported the survivors of the London Bridge terrorist attacks and the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire of the same year.
So what they've got, after 6 months, they've ended up with 3 names, a chair and her 2 sidekicks. The chair is a Labour Party Grandee, and I use that word intentionally, a baroness, a Labour Party baroness. To her right is Zoe Billingham from the police, and to her left is Eleanor Kelly from the Labour Party run council, or 2 Labour Party run councils in London. I'm not an MP. Perhaps it's a good thing I'm not an MP. Because my reaction in response to her, to Shabana Mahmood, would have probably got me in trouble if I was an MP. 6 months in, 20 years later, at least. The national inquiry that this government has been forced to announce is being led by a Labour Party peer, a senior person from within the police community, and a Labour Party council chief executive. How can the Shadow Home Secretary, who speaks in a bit, not challenge that? If you watched me yesterday, you will have seen my reservations on what the Conservatives said yesterday once, and I think I was fair because I didn't just generalise, I went into specific details with all of you. And these are, well, the establishment and the establishment, isn't it? Which is why they call us rabble. Let me continue.
Together, the chair and panel bring deep experience of championing children's rights, knowledge of policing and local government. and, crucially, a proven track record of holding powerful institutions to account. Each individual was recommended by Baroness Casey, and her recommendation follows recent engagement with victims. The first thing the Chair and panel will do, alongside Baroness Casey, is meet with victims later this week. Today, we also published the draft terms.
So what's took place there is Shabana Mahmood just reading off a script, very monotone, not trying to give anything away. It's a tactic you're taught, say it in such a way where they won't notice the severity of what you're saying. The government had a panel, a survivors panel. And in the last appointment, that survivors panel was consulted on the appointment. Remember, and they made a massive thing of it. They made a massive thing of talking about how the survivors would be interviewing and meeting the prospective candidates. And they made a massive point of how significant and important it was for the survivors to be genuinely involved. From their own panel, so they've handpicked their own survivors. What Shabana Mahmood has just admitted to is that no survivor was consulted or involved or engaged in any form whatsoever in the appointment of these 3 individuals. And it appears that Baroness Casey has handpicked them for the government. When you work on inquiries, when you work in public sector spaces, such as this, if Baroness Casey made the recommendations from her report, then you put her in that box and you leave her there and you make sure that she doesn't cross lines. There's got to be independence. So, they were sidelined. The government's own survivors panel have been completely ostracised by the government. No. I'll explain this in a minute. You've now started to play their game, which is what they want you to do. A national inquiry of this gravity should not be led by a politician or someone who ran a charity for the government and whose entire bank account is dependent on the goodwill of both the Labour Party and the Conservatives. Now, these types of inquiries require a specific skill set that historically judges have. But she's admitted, which is why I've just paused it there, that they have circumnavigated their own process, agreed process of consulting with their survivors panel before appointing the chair. Which is another reason why the likes of Fiona and Eliane leaving here is perfect. And the others? What are you going to be? You're going to be victims for the rest of your lives? Exploited, abused? Because this is exactly what they are doing to you here right now. Is it worth the £100 or the £200? There's tens of thousands, 100,000 girls that you represent. You, every one of you that remains on that panel, are a disgrace. Because the government has just totally ignored you. Oh, Raja, you can't say this to survivors. I'm treating them as leaders because they're in a leadership position. And each and every one of them should know better. You have just been bypassed. But she's going to meet with you later in the week. What are you going to do? Go and stick your tongue up the backside? Each and every one of you should resign. And if I'm being harsh, yes. I said to someone earlier in this transmission when it started, I'm not Gen Z, Gen W. I am from a very serious place. And this is a very serious matter. And if you walk into a space where you take on a leadership role, then with that comes responsibility, irrespective of where you've been before. And they have just walked all over you. And you're going to meet her later on in the week.
Reference, which I will place in the library of the House. Baroness Casey was clear this inquiry must be time limited to ensure that justice is swift for those who have already waited too long. For that reason, it will be completed within 3 years, supported by a £65 million budget. The inquiry will be a series of local investigations overseen by a national panel with full statutory powers. Baroness Longfield has confirmed that Oldham will have a local investigation. The chair and panel will determine the other locations in due course, and no area will be able to resist a local investigation. These terms of reference are clear on a number of vital issues. The inquiry is focused specifically on child sexual abuse committed by grooming gangs. It will
Another victory. Another victory. You missed. And you think, oh, Raja, you rant all the time. You're on X all the time, Facebook, YouTube. Every day you're writing stuff. Do you think the government gets to these positions on their own volition? When they've never got here on their own volition? We've been arguing that the local investigations will have statutory powers. The same, overseen, yeah? She just confirmed it. She's confirmed Oldham, and I know the council in Oldham are fuming because what they were proceeding with was an inquiry without statutory powers. We've been campaigning against that and we've just won. Whatever happens in Oldham now has got to have statutory powers. Secondly, we've been going around the country and councils have been voting, and some councils had the votes blocked, such as Barrow. Lancashire passed one, remember? Writing to the government saying they want to be included. Robbie Moore's been fighting for that in Bradford and the wider district there. What she's just admitted to is now it's not up to the councils to decide whether they're included. The terms of reference and the inquiry team will determine which councils and which areas are included. We've won there again. That didn't happen in a vacuum. Now, I know they're going to cover it up and I'll get to it, but she's trying to placate us, and you need to listen to some of the victories we forced out of them. Because we will hold them to it. And it'll take 3 years. A maximum of 3 years. Now, some of you are saying it's a disgrace. How long? Why that long? Let me be honest with you. It will take 3 years. If it's going to be done properly, it'll probably take longer, if I'm honest with you. I've said this to you all along. And the people who come along and say 6 months, 3 months, it's like the idiot builders you have to your house. Who offer you a price for something that is better than anyone else, and a time scale that can be done quicker than anyone else. It's because they have no idea what they're doing. This will take at least 3 years. And yes, I've read that they're only going as far back as 2000, but why are you worried? Why are you worried, Mary? I'm not worried about that at all. You know why I'm not worried about that at all? Because there's so much shit that's gone on in the last 25 years that by the time we're finished, this will have to lead to another inquiry that goes further back and deeper than this one. And in which case you do have no understanding of the Inquiries Act 2005, do you? You just picked up on that and you want to articulate that point of view. Because we forced them into the terms of reference to make reference to religion. They didn't want this at the beginning. They didn't want culture at the beginning. They didn't even want to talk about ethnicity. Keir Starmer in January called this a far-right bandwagon. So no. It won't do that. And when you say things like this, when you say things, oh, the Islamophobia definition will mean, they just want you to come up with that because you look thick. You come across stupid, easy to manipulate. If you want to whinge, if you want to complain, if you want to think nothing will happen, why are you wasting your time here with me? Because if I thought that way, we would never have got to this point. And what has that got to do with this, Mary? I feel completely for the Batley school teacher. But what has that got to do with this? We'll get to that.
Consider explicitly the background of offenders, including their ethnicity and religion, and whether the authorities failed to properly investigate what happened out of a misplaced desire to protect community cohesion. The inquiry will act without fear or favour, identifying individual, institutional and systemic failure, inadequate organisational responses and failures of leadership. It will also work hand in hand with the police. Where new criminality comes to light, be that by the perpetrators or those who covered up their crimes, the inquiry will pass evidence to law enforcement so they can take forward any further prosecutions and put more of these evil men behind bars.
She is just committed to the prosecution of those involved in the cover-up. She has just, in Parliament, the Home Secretary has just committed to the prosecution of those involved in the cover-up. And yes, doesn't she just? Jess Phillips looks haunted. Because Jess Phillips is involved in the cover-up. She's declared herself she's known for 14 years.
The inquiry must and will place victims and survivors at the forefront, with a charter setting out how they will participate and how their views, experiences and testimony will shape the inquiry's work. As I have said already, the terms are in draft form, The Chair will now consult on them with victims and other stakeholders, and they will be confirmed no later than March, when the inquiry can begin its work in earnest.
What can we do? Obviously, I'm going to lobby for the removal of these people and their resignations. You would expect nothing less of me, would you? But what can you do? The terms of reference are draft. They need to be consulted on for probably 3 months. I will run a workshop for you. And I'll forensically do what I do to those terms of reference so we can make sure that we have an understanding of where the shortcomings are. And you will write to your MPs, you will submit motions to your councils, and they will submit them to the government. That is what we will do. That is what political campaigning looks like. You can march up and down the street as many times as you want. It will not make a difference. But there are specific actions that we can now take because we've forced a hand to this and they're giving us wins. Can you see? They are dancing to our tune. What they believe they can do is they can contain this by determining who the chair is. They have never faced anything like us before. The Labour Party has never faced anything like this before.
Alongside launching this inquiry, Baroness Case's audit contained a number of other recommendations which the government accepted in full. As the inquiry begins its work, we continue righting these wrongs. I can announce today that I have commissioned new research from UK Research and Innovation to rectify the unacceptable gaps in our understanding of perpetrators' backgrounds and motivations, including their ethnicity and religion. My predecessor wrote to all police forces calling on them to improve the collection of ethnicity data. And while the Home Secretary does not currently have the power to mandate that this is collected, I will rectify this by legislating at the earliest possible opportunity.
Thank you, Sin, for coming to my aid. Political campaigning is not crooked. And I'm many things, but I'm not that either. Did you just hear what she said? The police forces across the country have been refusing or failing to capture the demographic data. And where the data there is, it's overrepresentation of Pakistani or Asian or Muslim or whatever, yeah? But we know the data has been hidden from us. She knows the data has been hidden from the nation. And she is about to change the law, making it unlawful for the police to hide the data. Where the fuck do you think that's come from, people? It's come from every one of you being outraged about these specifics because they cannot avoid these specific points because there is no defense against these specific shortcomings, these failings. Have a drink, have a biscuit, have a chocolate, whatever it is you do at 10 to 7. And take a step back. And take the win. Because this is another win. It would never have happened. There's every point of writing to a Labour MP. There's every point writing to your MP, irrespective of which party they are from. You don't get it, Steve. Evidence might be lost and might be deleted, but what cannot be deleted is the testimonies of people in a national inquiry compels people to give evidence. There's now a duty of candour, and they'll have to listen to me, the survivors, all the whistleblowers. They are trying to cover this up by the chair and the panel, not through the process, because they know they've lost on the process. They've conceded on the process. And look again at Jess Phillips's face. Look at that face, and throughout this, Shabana Mahmood is not looking up at all. Yeah? Let's carry on.
The Department for Education is currently interrogating gaps in children in need data identified in the audit, which seems to underreport the scale of this crisis. My right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, will soon publish the findings of an urgent review of this data conducted by her department. Across government, the audit identified that poor data sharing continues to put children at risk. As a result, we are introducing a legal duty for information sharing between safeguarding partners. We are creating a unique identifier for each child, linking all data across government. And we are upgrading police technology to ensure data can be shared across agencies. The audit also identified an absurdity in our legal system that saw some child rapists convicted of lesser crimes. As a result, we are now changing the law to make clear that children cannot consent when they have been raped by an adult, and so perpetrators are charged for the hideous crime they have in fact committed.
We've just forced another change in the law. The rape gangs that groomed these girls got away with a lot of it by saying, oh, they're the girlfriends, and got the girls to believe they were the boyfriends. And they were consenting. And there was a loophole in the law. Baroness Casey picked up on it. And now they're changing the law. It's an absurdity. She said it herself. So there are some parallel things going on here. And we've got to take these wins. We've got to take them because it gives us the strength to continue and carry on. And the wins are few and far between. The Home Secretary has just admitted in an absurdity in the law that meant children could say or be manipulated into saying that those who were raping them were their boyfriends. And that loophole will now be closed. My friends, together we have done this. Have you any idea how many children this will now protect? Have you any idea?
While the law has protected abusers from the consequences of their crimes, it has too often punished victims. Some survivors were convicted for crimes they had been coerced into, continuing their trauma to this day. We are already legislating in the Crime and Policing Bill to disregard offences related to prostitution. And the Minister of Justice is now working with the Criminal Cases Review Commission to ensure that they are resourced to review applications from individuals who believe that they were wrongly criminalised. The national audit identified further weaknesses in relation to taxi licensing. Abusers were applying for licences in areas where controls were lax to circumvent protection put in place by local councils to tackle abuse. My right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, will soon be legislating to close this dangerous loophole in the regulation of taxis.
Another win. Only yesterday I talked to you about taxes. Only yesterday I talked to you about taxes. They accept the loophole. And they're legislating against it so that the rapists, the taxi driving rapists, can't go from one place to another and get the licence. It's a massive win. That's another massive win. Sammy Woodhouse's campaign is still now legislated. Her and others, who were criminalised as children, as though it was their fault and they were childhood prostitutes or somehow involved in the grooming when they were being coerced and blackmailed. All of that has now got to be wiped clean. I can say that, Chloe, you can say that. But they prosecuted children as child prostitutes. To this day they have criminal records. Now those records have got to be purged. Because we forced this. Because we refused to look the other way. Because when they called us far right, we didn't behave like far right. We didn't behave in the way they wanted us to behave. We behaved with compassion, with dignity, and with a very clear moral clarity that has shamed every one of them. And that is why Jess Phillips is looking like that. Just look at her face. Look at the man next to him. I forget his name, sorry, but just look at the scowl on his face. This is killing them. Political victory, as I remind myself, is not pummeling someone. And I get those urges all the time, believe me. It is having your opponents do what you want them to do and what they have hated doing. Catherine, once this is over, and I think it'll be another 3, 4, 5 years if I'm honest with you, I'm going to sit on a park bench with a cheese sandwich, a packet of crisps and a flask of tea and see out my days. Let me continue.
The audit was clear that justice has not been done. Baroness Casey requested that a new National Police investigation was required to bring offenders to justice. Last month, the National Crime Agency launched Operation Beacon Port, reviewing previously closed cases of child sexual exploitation. It has already flagged more than 1,200 cases for potential reinvestigation, more than 200 of which are high-priority cases of rape. The evil men who committed these crimes and thought they got away with it will find they have nowhere to hide.
Hear, hear, hear. Here, here, here. Like Dave did it. You did it. Every one of you. We forced the National Crime Agency to act through political pressure. They launched a specific operation called Operation Beacon Port. 1,200 cases, 200 high-profile rape cases. How many children did those men rape? And you know, and I know it's more than 1,200 of them. We always argued that these rape gangs did not operate in silos and they were networked across the country. And look now. Look now. This, so we are not mistaken, is the year 2025. And we have run a campaign for the last 7 years, and there have been people before me that has had to force our government to take these positions that should never have been in any doubt whatsoever, to safeguard our children.
The audit finally called on the government to fund the delivery of its recommendations. Alongside investment in the inquiry itself, I can announce today that a further £3.65 million will be committed this year to the policing operation, survivor support and research into grooming gangs. This work, Madam Deputy Speaker, is essential. But without truth, there can be no justice. Today, I have announced the chair and panel of an inquiry which will shine a bright light on this dark moment in our history. They will do so alongside the victims of these awful crimes, who have waited too long to see justice done. This inquiry is theirs, not ours. So I call on all those present to put politics aside for a moment and to support this chair and her panel in the pursuit of truth and justice. And I commend this statement to the House.
There you go. There you go. Yeah? Now, I've got problems with the chair and what they're going to do next. And I will fight for each and every one of you. And I will fight for each and every one of our children who do not even know who we are or that we are fighting for them. But on a battlefield, today is a victory for us. And yes, they've run away and they're reorganizing and mobilizing. But right now, we, the people of the United Kingdom, those that they dismissed as far-right and racist, as rabble, as trouble causers, we are the ones that forced this through political campaigning, lawful political campaigning that they could not avoid.
Shadow Home Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let us remember victims are at the heart of this. Young girls, some only 10 years old, were groomed and gang raped by men of mainly Pakistani origin. Girls like Jane, just 12 years old when she was raped by an illegal immigrant. When she was found by police, instead of arresting the rapist, they arrested Jane. Or Anna, only 15 years old, who repeatedly told social workers that she had been gang raped, but instead of helping her, they allowed her to marry her main abuser in an Islamic ceremony, attended by the very social worker who should have protected her. Last week, sentencing remarks were published from several of these terrible cases. I warn the House, some of these are extremely graphic. One perpetrator, Mohammed Karar, raped a 12-year-old girl, and when she tried to fight back, he hit her with a baseball bat and then inserted the handle into her vagina. He also injected her with heroin and forced her to take crack cocaine. Another man, Arshid Hussain, viciously beat a young girl, stubbed out a cigarette on her chest, tied her up, and she was then repeatedly raped by numerous different Asian men. The same man, Arshid Hussain, also called a victim who had been raped and abused since the age of just 7, quotes, white trash. He said that Asian girls would not do what he was forcing her to do. There was an explicit racial element to his crime. He was raping his victim because she was white. The identity of the majority of the perpetrators is something that should not be hidden. A 2020 study by academics at the universities of Southampton and Reading reviewed 498 grooming gang convictions. They found that 83% of the perpetrators were of Muslim background, mainly, specifically, of Pakistani heritage. The Casey report and the Telford report made similar observations. The fact is, these crimes were deliberately covered up by those in authority who were more interested in so-called community relations and in avoiding being called racist than they were in protecting young girls. I spoke to a retired police officer who was told by a serving chief superintendent to stop investigating abuse by Pakistani origin taxi drivers in Bradford because the local police did not want to offend Bradford's Muslim community. And I've sent the name of that officer to the police for investigation. A former Labour MP, Simon Danchuk, was even told by the then chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party to stop asking questions to avoid antagonising the Muslim community in his town. Yet when the need for a national inquiry into this was raised in January, the Prime Minister disgracefully smeared those calling for an inquiry as, quotes, far right. What the Prime Minister claimed was a far right bandwagon in January had become government policy by June. So will the Home Secretary please apologise on behalf of the Prime Minister for what he said last January? The truth is, this should not have taken several months and the threat of a vote in Parliament to agree to this inquiry in the first place, and it should not have taken another 6 months to appoint a chair. That is what the survivors and their families told me yesterday. One of the most disturbing elements of this scandal is the deliberate cover-up of these crimes, as I have said. So can the Home Secretary assure the House that those in authority who covered up these crimes will be prosecuted for the offence of misconduct in public office, and will she ensure the inquiry refers such cases to the police for investigation? Can she confirm the inquiry will formally start in March of 2026 and that the final report will be published publicly 3 years later in March 2029? We have not yet seen the terms of reference. Survivors and their families, who I met yesterday, are concerned the scope of this inquiry may be too broad. So will the Home Secretary confirm it will focus specifically on localised, group-based grooming gangs, and that it will analyse the ethnicity and religious background of the perpetrators? She mentions local inquiries sitting underneath the national inquiry. Can she also specifically confirm that those local inquiries will be completely independent of those bodies they are investigating, particularly independent of local councils and independent of local police forces? They can't be allowed to investigate themselves. Will the Home Secretary also confirm that parents of survivors and victims will be able to serve on the panel as well? I spoke yesterday to 2 parents of survivors who felt they'd been excluded from the previous panels. Madam Deputy Speaker, for many survivors and victims, the truth has been hidden for far too long. These crimes were covered up because those in authority were more concerned about so-called community relations and avoiding being called racist than they were about protecting young children. That was an abject moral failure. The truth, at last, must come out.
I think that's all I want to play of that. I mean, you can, if you want to, I'll send you the link. I've just uploaded it direct from Parliament's webpage, so there's no copyright on it or anything like that. and you can watch it. I'll share it tomorrow with an article I write on Redwall and Rabble that'll expand on all of this. The answers to most of Chris Phillips' question was yes, 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 and yes. Of course, she doesn't apologise on behalf of Keir Starmer. My own MP, Jim McMahon, was there, shamelessly stood up and said, oh, we need to not just talk about the Pakistani men, we need to talk about the class of the victims. This is a man who tried to put me in prison and failed, and who has gangsters affiliated with the Labour Party in this town who have tried to kill me because of my campaigning on this issue. I have been clear from the outset. Racially motivated, religiously justified. I've also been clear that these were politically protected and socially sanctioned. They believed these children, because they were white and working class, were making lifestyle choices, and the establishment looked on contempt, with contempt, on the white working class. And the political protection is the votes that these men, through the Bravery system, controlled. I've articulated it, I've explained it, I've educated all of you on it. The work we've done, what we've gone through, has helped get us to this moment. I always say that. I don't shy away from saying that. Children were sold for votes. I don't shy away from saying that at all. I explained it, I articulated it, and I've evidenced it. So the government has conceded on all of this, and now they are trying to contain it. And you know what they're trying to do. This is the Labour Party. If this goes to where it needs to go to, Labour Party politicians will go to prison. They'll be put on trial. Which is why they've put the chair in that they have, and her two sidekicks, Zoe Billingham and Eleanor Kelly. And this is the next stage of what I want to talk to you about. So, if you've got 20 minutes, I'll share with you what I've got. What I ask you to do now, please, and this is one of the reasons I don't enjoy doing lives. I get no sign-ups whatsoever on the webpage. And if I don't get the sign-ups, this campaign stalls and we go absolutely nowhere. They are relying... Look, they've blacklisted me. They've tried to put me in prison and failed, and now they've blacklisted me. They're having some of my most powerful interviews removed from the internet. They threatened to sue me, and I told them I'd see them in the High Court, and they've run away. So I'm doing everything I can. And those of you who are here, I'm not asking for your money. I'm asking for you just to sign up to a bloody website, so I can not just send you information, so they know that when I speak with the authority and the support of thousands behind me. Does that make sense? Look at me. You can see there's no ego here. There's no desire for some vanity stats here. I'm not that sort of man. But I need your support, so when I stand and I speak, I know I've got 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 people behind me. Now, has there been anything you've heard from me today that gives you concern about my integrity? About my motivations? Or whether I have earned this right to lead this campaign? Thank you. I titled this Blair Insider to Starmer Grandee. A quarter century inside Labour's protection racket. This is not an inquiry. What they're trying to do now, I describe as a protection racket. Anne Longfield is not an independent outsider drafted in to confront power. She is a Labour grandee whose quarter-century career runs in an unbroken line from Tony Blair's Downing Street to Keir Starmer's grooming gang inquiry. She has never been outside the machine that created this scandal. She has never challenged the institutions that covered it up. She has never even named the crime. So many of you have said Shabana Mahmood won't talk about the Pakistani rape gangs. She won't mention the Pakistani rape gangs. Well, neither will the chair of this inquiry say Pakistani either, nor has she done in the past. Whilst Pakistani rape gangs were operating across Labour-controlled towns, Longfield was inside Number 10 helping design Blair's flagship children's programmes. She later ran a charity that collapsed into administration. She then took over the Children's Commissioner's office at precisely the point it had already helped sanitise the grooming gang scandal. Instead of dismantling that narrative, she endorsed it. She has since built a public identity around anti-racism and racial inclusion, while never once speaking plainly about Pakistani heritage rape gangs. As Children's Commissioner, she was formally criticised for abusing her powers and misusing public money. This is the person this government has appointed to lead the national reckoning, as Shabana Mahmood used that word. She was not chosen despite these conflicts. She was chosen because of them. There is something called the structural capture. You never go outside the system, because the system protects the system. Longfield's relationship with Labour is not incidental, it is structural. In the early 2000s, she was not a charity campaigner lobbying from the outside. She was seconded into the Prime Minister's strategy unit, cabinet office I think it was, embedded inside Tony Blair's Downing Street, helping shape the children and early years agenda, including Sure Start. This was the heart of new Labour policy making. This isn't activism, this isn't independence, this is embedded in state power. New Labour's defining instinct was always the same: manage risk, avoid destabilising truths, and wrap everything in the language of care while keeping politics firmly under control. That is the culture Longfield was formed in. After leaving Number 10, she moved into running a charity, I use that term loosely, called For Children, Number 4 and Children. It was an organisation tightly aligned with Labour's early years strategy. MPs were cultivated, government contracts flowed, and the charity became part of the extended machinery of the state. It looked independent, but it was anything but. From there, she stepped into one of the most sensitive roles in the country: Children's Commissioner for England. That is a crown appointment. Nobody seriously believes it is detached from government. She took over an office whose work on grooming gangs had already been used to reassure ministers and councils that ethnicity was a distraction, that Pakistani perpetrators should be folded into a race-neutral story about CSE in gangs and groups. Let me show you. Let me show you the article. I went and found it earlier. There's a number of articles I've got on it, but let me show you this one. So the charity she left, childcare charity for children, not long after she left, it went into administration. It collapsed. And it collapsed where she was named. Look, charity leaders blamed the collapse of For Children, a respected and nationally recognised charity, on an increasingly tight financial environment. The rapid expansion of For Children was overseen by Redmond's predecessor, Anne Longfield, who left 18 months ago. So the circumstances she cultivated is what led, or contributed at the very least, to the collapse of this charity. She goes on to become Children's Commissioner. She goes on to become Children's Commissioner in an environment where her predecessors had produced this report defending a child sex abuse report, and Sue Berlowitz says criticism of the report into child sexual exploitation is unhelpful. And look at this. Others accused it of failing to address a particular problem of the targeting of white girls by networks of British Pakistani men. They were covering this up in the Children's Commissioner's office. The date of this article, is the 21st of November 2012. Do you see? She didn't challenge this work. She embraced it. That's not a break with the past. It's continuity. She goes on to work for other organisations. She set something up. Before that, let me bring this up. She comes in. I'll read it. The Children's Commissioner for England has cancelled a consultancy contract with a former Deputy Commissioner after the Department of Education said it fell outside government rules. Does that mean she broke the law? The Times reported that Sue Berlowitz, that's that woman who I just showed, was due to be paid £960 a day for up to 9 days a month until November, leading an inquiry into child sexual abuse in the family context. Berlowitz had accepted voluntary redundancy at the end of April. So she made her redundant on full pensions and stuff and then hired her as a consultant. And she wasn't allowed to do that. That's what their own government investigation found. In a statement, the Children's Commissioner Anne Longfield said, I have been advised by the Department for Education that they now judge our contract with Sue Berlowitz to fall outside government rules and have therefore cancelled it. Yeah. So that's what they'd done. And then afterwards, she went on to this. Another organisation she created. Centre for Young Lives. The Centre for Young Lives was founded by Baroness Anne Longford, CBE, in February 2024. All of these organisations are reliant on the goodwill of government income. Yeah? So she's done all that and becomes made a baroness by Keir Starmer when this government came in. Longfield was in Noble, what is she? Baroness Longfield becomes a Labour peer in the House of Lords. Months later, she was handed the grooming gangs inquiry. We are told she will relinquish the whip while chairing it. 25 years embedded in the Labour Party, but it's all right, well, relinquish the whip whilst I'm chairing it. As though that somehow erases 2 decades of ideological alignment and institutional loyalty. It doesn't. Before anyone talks about her suitability to run a £65 million inquiry, they should look honestly at her record of leadership. At 4 children, Longfield oversaw rapid and aggressive expansion. The charity grew from a small operation into a national organisation with around 1,500 staff. Contracts multiplied, exposure grew, growth became the measure of success. Then in 2016, not long after Longfield left to become the Children's Commissioner, 4 children collapsed into administration. Staff were laid off, services disappeared overnight, vulnerable families were left in limbo, sector analysis pointed to familiar problems, over-expansion, weak reserves, poor risk management and dependence on government contracts. How can you trust her with a national inquiry? One such as this, that may represent our final opportunity for accountability. When Longfield became Children's Commissioner in 2015, she inherited an institution already implicated in the Pakistani rape gang cover-up. I've shown you it. It's in The Guardian. Not by silence, but by narrative. Under her predecessor, with Sue Berlowitz as Deputy Commissioner, the office has produced the Inquiry into Child Sexual Exploitation in Gangs and Groups. Those reports did something deeply consequential. They dissolved Pakistani heritage grooming gangs into an abstract, race-neutral category. When victims and frontline workers knew to be organised networks of Pakistani men targeting white girls was rebanded as generic CSE in gangs and groups, ethnicity was blurred, culture was avoided, religion was nowhere to be seen, and the defining feature of the crime was made unspeakable. That wouldn't surprise me at all. She is as establishment as they come. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to you. When challenged in 2012, Berlowitz defended the report publicly. The office, the Commissioner for Children's Office, stood behind it. That work then sat on desks across policing, local government and Whitehall, providing exactly the cover institutions wanted. The experts say you can't talk about ethnicity. The experts say it isn't a factor. This is the organisation Longfield went and led. She could have reopened the work after Rotherham. She could have acknowledged that the framing was wrong. She could have said that the Children's Commissioner's Office had failed victims and that these were racially motivated crimes and we must address them as such. Did she do any of that? Did she fuck? When Berlowitz left office in May 2015, the official statement issued under Longfield's leadership said the organisation was, quote, proud of the work done by the inquiry into the sexual exploitation of children in gangs and groups which Sue led. They were proud of the cover-up. That's not neutrality. That's not avoiding the issue. That is owning it and saying, yes, we did a job. Endorsement is not the end of this woman. After removing Sue Berlowitz from her formal role, Longfield rehired her as a consultant. The same individual who authored and defended the whitewashed inquiry was brought back on a day rate of up to £960 to continue working on child sexual abuse. This was not handled transparently. The Treasury approved Berlowitz's enhanced severance payment on the understanding she was leaving. It was not informed that she would be immediately rehired. The required approvals were not secured, and the payments were routed through a private company. When the Department for Education later reviewed the arrangement, it ruled that it breached government rules. The contract was cancelled and public money had to be repaid, and this sequence matters. Longfield did not merely inherit a compromised narrative, she endorsed it, she protected its architect, she broke the rules to keep that person in place. That tells you far more about her instincts than any mission statement ever could. As Children's Commissioner, Longfield spoke at length about vulnerable children, exploitation, gangs, safeguarding. She talked about online abuse, system failures and prevention. What she did not do was name the crime. She did not talk about Pakistani rape gangs. She did not acknowledge the organised model of abuse. She did not confront the fear of racism allegations that paralysed police and councils. She did none of those things. Her vocabulary was always managerial, always abstract, always safe. This, my friends, is not how you challenge a cover-up. It is how you maintain one. And if that wasn't bad enough, since leaving office, Longfield has leaned heavily into anti-racism and racial inclusion as a public cause. As recently as October 2025, 6 weeks ago, she was urging the Department for Education to make anti-racism a central priority. She warned about black children feeling over-policed and framed British institutions as structurally biased against minorities. Like, what the fuck? Here we've got a rape gang cover-up. 100,000 children more. And the former Children's Commissioner is warning about black children feeling over-policed and how British institutions are structurally biased against minorities. Just set that beside the reality of the grooming gang scandal. This was a scandal defined by institutions bending over backwards to avoid being called racists, even as minority perpetrators raped girls with impunity. Anti-racism was not absent. Anti-racism, as I've been shouting and screaming, had been weaponized. Someone whose professional identity depends on locating racism against minorities in every institution, is now being asked to lead an inquiry into a crime where that same ideological reflex silenced victims. That is not neutrality. It is conflict built into the role. What you have here is the state investigating itself. Survivors did not ask for reassurance. They did not ask for safeguarding seminars or carefully worded reports. They asked for independence. Fiona, Ellie, all of them, they asked for independence. Without independence, the Home Secretary said about without the truth you can't get to justice. Well, I will go a step further back. Without independence, you cannot get to the truth. And that independence would have come with a judge. What they got instead was Anne Longfield, a Blair era insider turned Labour peer, a woman who endorsed the grooming gang's whitewash, a woman who rehired its architect after praising her work, a woman who speaks about exploitation while refusing to name the perpetrators, a woman whose politics rests on the same anti-racist orthodoxy that paralysed the state. This appointment is not incompetence. It is design. She has been chosen because she understands the limits of acceptable truth. She knows how to turn criminal betrayal into systemic failure. She knows how to deliver obscure for institutions without delivering justice for victims. This inquiry will not fail by accident. It will succeed exactly as intended. It will generate volume, not accountability, process, not justice, relief for the state, not resolution for the survivors. And when the report finally lands in 3 years, the public will be told that the matter is settled. It won't be. If the inquiry proceeds under Anne Longfield, the grooming gang scandal will not end in justice. It will end in administrative burial. The system failed 100,000 children, maybe more. Then it denied what it had done. Then it rephrased it, and now it is investigating itself. This is not accountability. It is the final act of the cover-up. And the question is no longer whether the truth exists. They have admitted the truth today. The question is whether you will stand with me and stop them burying the truth again. By the time we get to the end of this, I am clear on my place. I will either be dead because they've killed me, I will be in prison, or politicians complicit in the cover-up of the gang rape of our nation's children will be held to account in a way this country has never been seen. And this is where I am. This is where we are. And the rest, my friends, is honestly, genuinely up to you. We are not powerless. We have never been powerless. I will campaign to have her removed. And even if I can't have her removed, I will campaign in such a way where I will make her life hell for the next 3 years as we scrutinise every decision, every piece of paper. And then I also know that this inquiry is but another step on our journey. And there are many steps yet to take to get to where we need to get to. And sorry, I petition will make no difference whatsoever, Sue. I think you are new to my campaigning and new to my method of working. I will educate you. Don't worry about that. So what do I do next? I make sense of the terms of reference. I'll spend all night making sense of that, and I'll share something with you tomorrow, and I'll try and come back tomorrow and say, this is what the opportunities are, this is what the weaknesses are. This is what we need to do. This is what they want to close down. And my ability to campaign, my ability to work is 100% reliant on you. And this is where it gets disheartening. An hour and a half later, all that work later, do you know how many people have subscribed and signed up? 2. Where we go next is entirely up to you. A very good evening.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.